Halloween, my favorite season, filled with chills, thrills, and of course, the one part of the year I don't seem like a psychopath when I tell friends and family what I do on YouTube. It's a season that has always been treasured in my family and has given me so many cherished memories from my childhood. However, not everyone has had such fond memories of the holiday. So for this month, let's explore the times when Halloween terrors came to life. Events that have left scars on those who witnessed these tragedies. So as you spend this spooky season with your friends and loved ones, remember that the horrors you encounter in movies and haunted houses can come to life. These are the most disturbing events to happen on Halloween. In October of 2001 in Sparta, Michigan, a police investigation was opened after getting a report of a death at the Sparta horse farm haunted hayrides. When investigators came out late in the evening, the owners of the farm, Thomas and Rebecca Bradley, pointed them to an employee of the haunted hayrides, who they found hung by a noose along the horse cart path in the woods. Believing they had a murder on their hands, the investigators immediately locked down the farm, gathering up employees to question and identify the victim once brought down from the tree. The victim was 14-year-old Caleb Reb, a local boy in Sparta. After questioning, the Bradleys told investigators that Caleb was brought to their farm by another teen employee for the haunted attraction. After driving her son to the farm, Caleb's mother, Kathy, asked Thomas and Rebecca if her son could work for the Halloween season on the hayride. Unfortunately, Thomas had told the two that he was fully staffed already. When Caleb was told this, he responded to his mother and the Bradleys with, "Well, can I just stay and hang around?" he said. "I'll work for free. I don't have to be paid." Caleb stayed that evening and later telephoned his mother twice to say he had been allowed to take part and to tell her that he wanted to be scarier to the passerbys. When the wagon went by, he didn't know what to do, so he just turned and looked at it and said, "Boo," Kathy said. He started that evening by working at a post featuring a coffin, then switched with another worker who had been at a station with a skeleton hanging from a noose tied to a small tree. Caleb spoke with another teen about replacing the skeleton with himself in order to make the attraction even scarier. However, alone at the scene, Caleb let go of the rope with the noose around his neck, and the tree whipped back and pulled the rope taut, choking him as his feet remained on the ground. As Caleb started scrambling to get the tightening noose off his neck, a hay cart filled with guests began to pull up. The worker driving the cart told investigators that the guests were impressed and slightly disturbed that the haunted attraction included a boy hanging himself, but the kid's acting was really good. Caleb, unable to speak and attempting to stay on his toes, eventually passed out after the first cart had passed. By the time the next one had come around, Caleb was no longer breathing. Now realizing that something was wrong, the next employee was the one to stop the ride and reach Caleb. Again, it took several minutes along with the pleading of the employee to convince the guest on the hayride to go get help, as they believed it was part of the ride. It was then that the police were called, and the medics that arrived were unable to resuscitate Caleb. "We know he didn't try to hurt himself," his mother told reporters. "He thought he was safe because he was on the ground." "He loved people and he had a huge heart," Kathy Reb said. She said she and her husband do not understand why those who saw their son struggling with the noose did not realize sooner he was in trouble, A grim word of warning this season as you brave haunted houses and haunted trails to keep a keen eye out. Because who knows what is just part of the attraction and what is reality. Jerry Damon, his wife Marilyn, and their two children, 2-year-old Stephen Damon and their 7-month-old Pamela, lived in Long Island, New York. At the time, Jerry was an airman at the base at Long Island's Mitchell Field, while Marilyn was a stay-at-home mother. On the 31st of October 1955, Marilyn and the two children went to a bakery in East Meadow, New York, to pick up some fresh bread. While Marilyn popped into the bakery at 2:45 p.m., she left Stephen and Pamela, who was in the stroller, outside the store. There were several other strollers parked outside, and Marilyn told Stephen to be good and that she would be back in just a few minutes. It was something which I had done 1,000 times, and other women still do, Marilyn later recalled. It was a decision she came to regret forever. When Marilyn exited the store, she found the stroller and Stephen missing. Eventually, the stroller was found a few blocks away. Pamela was safe and sound inside the stroller, but Stephen was nowhere to be found. Marilyn had to be rushed to the hospital to be treated for shock, while a search party consisting of around 2,000 volunteers, as well as personnel from Mitchell Field, Boy Scouts, police officers, and firemen, was set up. They searched the area surrounding the bakery and fanned out searching parks, golf courses, and waterways. A missing person poster describes Stephen as 38 inches, 32 pounds, blonde hair and blue eyes, with a scar under his chin and a birthmark resembling a mole on the back of his lower calf. He was last seen wearing blue overalls, a blue polo shirt, and a red sweater with white and blue ships on the front and brown shoes. Posters were distributed across the city, while locals were asked if they had seen Stephen or witnessed anything suspicious. Police officers drove Marilyn throughout the city in a sound truck. As they drove, she called, "Stevie, where are you?" into the speaker. She and Jerry pleaded on national television for their son to be returned to them. They said that Stephen suffered from anemia and that he needed to take medication, including vitamins, aspirin, and a tonic. Over the next couple of years, the FBI followed tips all across the country on Stephen's disappearance. In November of 1955, 3 letters were sent to the Stevens family demanding ransom for his safe return. Each letter requested a larger amount of money. The first one requested $3,000, the second requested $10,000, and the third requested $14,000. Stevens' family attempted to comply to the demands, but would soon discover the letters were from a fraudster who knew nothing about Stephen's disappearance and were simply trying to con them out of money. One popular theory was that Stephen was the boy in the box, a young boy who was found murdered in a box in Philadelphia 2 years after Stephen disappeared. Using Steve's sister's DNA, this theory was ruled out in 2003. There were also several reports of a female hitchhiker with a small boy resembling Stephen in Minneapolis. There was another claim of a woman and a boy who looked like Stephen in a tavern in Kansas. However, none of the leads ever panned out. A promising lead came to the surface in 2009, when a man in Michigan went to the police and relayed the belief he was Stephen. The man, John Barnes, looked strikingly similar to Jerry and gave Stephen's family hope.
Tucked inside a worn manila envelope are old pictures and newspaper clippings Jerry Damon has kept for nearly 55 years since his son disappeared. Stephen Damon was just 2 months shy of his 3rd birthday when he was kidnapped, and his father has never stopped wondering what happened.
It's always in the back of your mind somewhere, even though it has been a long time.
Damon says his son's disappearance got a lot of media attention at the time, but despite all their efforts, police never solved the case.
There were leads, but of course, none of them were the right one. We just didn't come up with an answer.
There is now new hope that Damon may get some of those answers, but the sudden media attention surrounding the story of a Michigan man who believes he may be the missing son is overwhelming, and Damon is careful not to let himself get caught up in that possibility.
You kind of want to be cautious, and in the past I've learned not to get your hopes too high.
But if it turns out this man, John Barnes, could be Damon's son, it would mean some much-needed answers for the family.
It would be nice to have some closure on it and find out what happened, maybe, really.
Jerry spoke with John, who said that he was too young to remember anything from around that time frame, and said that the family that raised him had never suggested that he was anything other than their biological son. However, he said that he never felt as though he was a part of the family he was brought up in, and started looking into missing person cases, eventually zoning in on the disappearance of Stephen. John's claims were taken very seriously, and he provided a DNA sample which was taken to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia, to see if it were a match with DNA from Stephen's family. Unfortunately, however, DNA tests proved that he was mistaken. John's father, Richard, would come forward to say that John certainly was his son, and that he believed his son was disgruntled over the fact that his father divorced his mother in 1972. His sister, Cheryl, said that John had long believed that he was adopted or that he had been switched at birth. John spoke with the media following the DNA test and apologized for any heartache that he had caused, stating, "I honestly thought I was that kid that was kidnapped." Stephen Damon is still missing to this day, and with every passing year, the leads have become less and less. In the year 2022, the NYPD have digitally aged up Stephen to what he would look like at his current age of 67. Along with this image is a tip line to call if this man looks at all familiar to you. On Halloween night of 2014 in Long Island, New York, groups of kids and parents witnessed a spooky display in their neighborhood while trick-or-treating. Out of a house, a hooded man drug out a prop of a headless person and laid it in the street. Sitting next to the body was the fake prop's, fake head. Kids and parents paid no mind to the decoration and watched as the man walked away from the home, leaving the decoration on the curb of the street and disappearing into the Halloween night. Impressed by the prop, parents and kids walked up to the headless display to get a closer look. When they did, parents immediately were hit with the horrible stench of human decay, and as the fake blood really started to pool at their feet from the body, parents began to realize that the severed head and the headless body weren't decorations at all. The body belonged to Professor Patricia Ward of Farmingdale State College, who taught language arts for 28 years there, and the man who had placed her there was her 35-year-old son, Derek Ward. Her son used a knife to decapitate her just before 8:00 p.m. that day in the Farmingdale apartment where they both lived. Police say that Ward used a knife to cut off his mother's head in front of their apartment building, then kicked the head across the street. In addition, she had suffered multiple stab wounds and broken bones. He then took his own life by throwing himself in front of a train at the nearby station. Detectives say that Patricia Ward had a psychiatric history dating back approximately 10 years. It had only gotten worse within the last year. It just seemed to be he was acting out, said Detective Lieutenant John Azada of Nassau Homicide. Ward had been arrested several times since 2003 for various gun, drugs, and criminal mischief charges. Even more saddening was the fact that several children, after witnessing the body in the street, also had to receive some psychiatric therapy after realizing that what they had seen was actually a dead body. In 2012, Julie Keith, a 42-year-old vehicle donation manager at a Southeast Portland Goodwill, had purchased a $29.99 Kmart graveyard kit earlier in October. But on a Sunday afternoon in that late month, Keith pulled the orange and black box from storage. She intended to decorate her home in Damascus for her daughter's 5th birthday just days before Halloween. She ripped open the box and threw aside the cellophane. That's when Keith found it. Scribbled onto paper and folded into eighths, the letter was tucked between 2 styrofoam headstones. The letter read, "Sir, if you occasionally buy this product, please kindly resend this letter to the World Human Rights Organization. Thousands of people here who are under the persecution of the Chinese Communist Party government will thank you and remember you forever." The graveyard kit, the letter read, was made in Unit 8, Department 2 of the Masanjia labor camp in Xinjiang, China. People who work here have to work 15 hours a day without Saturday-Sunday break and any holidays. Nearly no payment. 10 won per month. 10 won is equivalent to $1.61. People who work here suffer punishment 1 to 3 years averagely. Many of them are Falun Gong practitioners who are totally innocent people only because they have different beliefs to the CCPG. They often suffer more punishment than others. The letter was not signed. Shocked, Keith sat down as her mind reeled. Wow, that's daring, she thought. She imagined the desperation the writer must have felt, the courage he or she must have mustered to slip the letter into that box. If caught, what would happen to them? Like a message in a bottle, the letter traveled more than 5,000 miles over the Pacific Ocean. It could not be ignored. The anonymous letter evoked skepticism, however. Written largely in English scrawl, it was almost too bold of an act to seem plausible. Still, US authorities on China took note. "We're in no position to confirm the veracity or origin of this," said Sophie Richardson, China director at Human Rights Watch. "I think it is fair to say the conditions described in the letter certainly conform to what we know about conditions in re-education through labor camps. China's re-education through labor is a system of punishment that allows for detention without trial. Various reports allege followers of the banned spiritual group Falun Gong are sent to the reform camps. Claims supported in the letter, but the facts are difficult to confirm." Masanjia labor camp is located in the industrialized capital of the Liaoning province in northeast China. A Google search of the camp yields pages of grim results. If this thing is real, that's somebody saying, "Please help me, please know about me, please react," Richardson said. "That's our job." Unfortunately, while this story did break across the country, there isn't much that could be done because of politics within the country of China. However, the discovery did open a federal investigation into the Sears holding company, as it is illegal for retail companies to purchase items from working slave camps like Masanjia. While Sears denied any knowledge of where the Kmart stores were purchasing their inventory, it still didn't hold up in the investigation, leaving the Sears holding company with fines on top of fines for the major ethical violation. And all of this international conflict spawned from a brave worker in these camps that wrote a note and stuck it in between two styrofoam headstones with nothing but a hope that whoever in America received it was a kind person. And luckily that was the case, and the conditions in these camps were exposed to the world. This last event is from my home city of Indianapolis, Indiana, and despite how long ago it was, many people in this city still retell the tragedy at the Indiana State Fairgrounds in 1969. The act performing that Halloween night in the Coliseum was an ice skating show called Holiday on Ice. It was just after 11 p.m., with only 3 minutes remaining in the opening night show. The skaters were finishing a medley called Mardi Gras. While the Hoosiers in the stands were enjoying the show, nobody, including the venue's staff, had noticed the smell of propane all around the building. No one in the staff had checked the maintenance rooms that week, and propane gas was leaking from a rusty tank in the concession area, slowly filling the unventilated parts of the building. As the skaters began gliding into a pinwheel formation for the finale, the gas came in contact with an electric popcorn machine at the concession stands. When the gas ignited, a blast of orange flame shot 40 feet up through the south side seats, catapulting people and chairs through the air. Concrete chunks and body parts rained down. Many of the spectators fell on the ice on the south side of the arena, while others fell into a crater caused by the explosion and were buried underneath huge slabs of concrete. 54 people were killed on the scene, and another 20 later died of their injuries. Indianapolis news reporter Bill Roberts was attending the show with his wife. He described the scene in graphic detail. For a few seconds, no one cried out. Then there were screams and cries of agony, and the audience jumped from their seats as if in unison and started rushing for the exits. The orchestra continued to play, however. My wife was drawn to a small blonde girl with her mother. The child's blue coat was soaked with blood. They were looking for her father. Outside the main entrance, a man was sitting with a huge black and blue lump by his left eye. Part of his lower calf on his leg was completely severed off. Indianapolis Star reporter Richard R. Roberts reported the events as he saw them. "You walked into a nightmare. This was the worst thing I have seen since combat in World War II. The lights above still casted bluish light onto the ice show. A red satin slipper lay on the ice. 3 feet away was a pool of blood. A gray-haired man lay on his back staring lifelessly at the ceiling, Ambulance medics threw a gray blanket over him. Chairs were scattered like tin pins on the south side of the big building. The fairgrounds itself was almost like a battleground, the surrounding streets thick with police and the edges of the streets jammed with crowds like war refugees, slowing the movement of ambulances and fire engines. Rescuers used the nearby cattle barn at the fairgrounds as a temporary hospital, and the coroner's office set up a temporary morgue on the ice floor. The dead were placed on plywood and lined up on the ice according to gender and age. Family members who came to identify loved ones had to register at the administration building before being led to the Coliseum. Every hospital in Indianapolis and surrounding counties took in the wounded. Medical and nursing students were also utilized and brought to the scene. A Marion County grand jury indicted the state fire marshal, the Indianapolis fire chief, the general manager, and the concessions manager of the Coliseum, as well as officers of the company that supplied the gas. But there was only one conviction, the president of the gas supplier, and that verdict was later overturned by the Indiana Supreme Court. According to the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis, victims and survivors ultimately received about $4.6 million in settlements. And being a Hoosier myself, I do find it fascinating that Halloween evening has not been forgotten by the city. But longtime viewers of my channel know that I thoroughly believe that Indiana is the most haunted state, and when tragedy happens that actually has an explanation, people tend to cling to it. However, I would still not suggest bringing up this tragedy if you visit Indianapolis. Most people don't like to be reminded of that event, especially during the month of October. So those were some disturbing events that happened on Halloween that I found. There are definitely more events to make this video an hour long, but since we have a whole month, maybe we'll come back when it's closer to Halloween and look at some more. But if you can't wait until then, you can always catch me streaming on this channel. Recently, I've been playing the Gilbert Garfield ARG with chat and putting together a thorough video breaking it apart. You can also find me on Twitter, and you can support my channel on Patreon like these lovely folk. With that, this has been Pagan Valley, and I wish you all a good evening.